Good to have you back with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. You may remember the story of Cliven Bundy and the battle that he had with the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, and how the government never really intervened and finished the job. Well, they're back at it. This time the story comes to us from Burns, Oregon, where a group of protesters, armed and threatening, have taken over a national wildlife refuge building because they don't like the way the federal government is operating and trying to get some land that is owned by a group of people that says they don't want to give it up. In an interview with a radio talk show host on the right wing, Ammon Bundy is the son of Cliven Bundy. He's one of the protesters that's up there armed and ready to go in Oregon. He says this about a possible confrontation.
The ranch is adjacent to the Militia National Wildlife Refuge and to have private property up on the Steen Mountains. They have refused for nearly 40 years to sell their ranch. And there have been very vindictive behaviors because they refuse. There have been intimidations, and the list goes on.
Heidi Beirich, she is the Director of Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center. Heidi, good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
Thanks for having me.
What is at the heart of this beef? Is it the federal government wanting to acquire some land for a national wildlife project? What is it?
Look, at the heart of this, I would argue, is the fact that the federal government did not rein in the folks who were riled up at the Bundy situation. They were able to basically point firearms at federal agents and other kinds of law enforcement and run them off. And
after they broke the law, that's right. They were never reeled in.
That's exactly right. There were snipers actually pointing weapons at federal officials and Las Vegas PD out there at the Bundy Ranch. Nobody was prosecuted for it. This entire movement was energized and emboldened by that, and we're now seeing the fallout because these are the same folks who were at the Bundy Ranch who are now occupying this building up there in Oregon.
So what is the issue here? Does the landowner not want to sell, being forced to sell? What started this to the point, and how many protesters are we talking about, and how determined? How would you give analysis to this?
Sure. Well, the weird thing that's happening here is there are two men from the Hammond family who are ranchers in that area, and they've already been prosecuted for setting fires on public land. They're going to prison today. They have said they're going to report for prison, and they have actually said they don't want to have anything to do with the group of people who have taken over this, these office buildings at this wildlife refuge. Now, the people at the wildlife refuge are there claiming that the federal government essentially should have no control over any public lands. Really, they don't want public lands, period, in the West. And that's the beef that they have, and they have basically threatened, if they need to use violence to stop the federal government from basically controlling its own property, right? I mean, that's what's at the heart of this dispute.
So the question is, how far will it go? This is Bundy talking to a radio reporter on the scene.
If the federal government decides to use force, will you respond with force as well?
That would have to be determined at that time. I would not be able to report on that.
Are you prepared to?
Absolutely.
Do we have another Waco on our hands, Heidi?
Well, I mean, that's obviously the concern, and these guys have already gotten away with threatening violence, right, one time. So you sort of have to think that they probably would be willing to go there again. I mean, that's what basically Ammon Bundy just said in that clip that you played. So it's a really volatile situation. I'm not exactly sure how many folks are in that building. You know, there have been reports of between like 25 and 60. What we do know is that they're armed. So we've got a bunch of armed people occupying a building saying they hate the federal government and they're willing to use violence if necessary. That's a recipe for disaster.
And the Bundy boys basically are being used as a PR piece. They come from Nevada, now in Oregon. They really have no parochial dog in this fight other than to gather attention nationwide, correct?
That's exactly right, and they have shown up in some other places. There was a battle over a pit mine in Oregon earlier this year that happened. There have been some run-ins in other parts of federal land in Nevada and other places, and so every time there's some kind of flare-up over land use, they're taking advantage of it to publicize it. But this, of course, is going much further by taking over this building.
And the Southern Poverty Law Center views this as what? I mean, is it a neo-Nazi movement? Is it a Confederate movement? Is it an anti-federalist movement? Give us a label here or zero in on definition.
Sure. I mean, these people are all basically members of the anti-government movement. They call themselves patriots. And what those are not like people who want lower taxes, right, conservatives. Yeah. These are people who literally believe the federal government is the enemy and that it should have no jurisdiction whatsoever. And that's why they were willing to pull out weapons against federal agents in the dispute with Bundy. I mean, my God, Bundy owes over $1 million, has been prosecuted in courts in Las Vegas, Cliven Bundy I'm talking about, several times, and he's what's called a sovereign citizen. He denies that the federal government has any power over him whatsoever. And that's really what's at the heart of this, these rabid anti-government beliefs that drive these people to the point of a gun, basically, to try to push their positions.
Heidi Beirich, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
Thank you.
You bet. She's the Director of Intelligence Project at the Southern Poverty Law Center.